Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of This Week in San Diego Soccer History. I'm John Cross, along with Dylan Wilson, and tonight we're going to do part 3 of our series on the San Diego Spirit, where we take a look at the from where we left off in part 2 all the way like the 6 months before kickoff, and at least look at a few of the opening games of the 2001 season for the WUSA. But before we jump into that, Dylan, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing all right. I had a pretty busy day, so I didn't get to do as much prep as I wanted to, but that's okay. I read through quite a bit of it um, on my own time. So
All right. Well, that's good. I had I don't know. I mean, today's been very interesting, kind of like you said, but had kind of some mixed times for today. I have to say, even though this is not really the podcast for this, I'm much irritated around all the shenanigans about Columbus being named the newest NWSL
yeah, I
franchise
saw
this
that.
afternoon. And I know that's not really what we're here to talk about, but the one of the good things I've done this last week, I was able to carve out some time to really do some future planning for us on the podcast and map out some episodes, and really started to dig in a little deeper to the 1968 San Diego Toros that played in the NASL. It was San Diego's first team that it ever had in the NASL. And in looking at the history leading up to those leagues, so it's going to be, again, like we've done with the Jaws and the Spirit, it'll be a multi-part series, but we'll also tie in some general US soccer history into those episodes. But without giving too much away, I've spent a lot of time looking at the commercialization of sport in the 50s and 60s in general, and um, what owners and investors wanted to do with the various leagues that had been attempted in terms of soccer in the 1960s. And all of that, like the worst parts of all of that, just kind of dovetail into all the events that happened today with the Columbus Crew, or not Columbus Crew, Columbus being named
The Columbus
a,
Crewette.
yeah, well, an ownership group is the same, but um, yeah,
No,
it
I know
just there's
that's yeah.
a lot of feelings around the ridiculousness of the franchise fee, and just so many different things that I'm sure we'll be able to dip into some of the origins of these things when we get to that particular series. So I think it'll be fun. It'll be interesting. Um, but it just a whole bunch of things came together today with that announcement, and it's just like we haven't made it, in some respects we really haven't made it very far in this sport in the last 50 plus years.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, and unfortunately, probably for us for the long run, and some of these things will dovetail into the San Diego Spirit series as we look at eventually a few episodes from now how the WUSA ended. Um, but yeah, we don't seem to learn very well or very quickly um, in terms of what we want in the United States out of professional leagues, at least what owners want out of them compared to what the fans want out of them.
Yes, the American populace's inability to learn from experience applies only to sports and nothing else.
Right. Yeah. But we'll dive into some of those things in some future episodes. But for today, let's go ahead and jump into our trivia question that we finished off at the end of last week. So let me get that pulled up here. And last week we asked, who was the first brother, sister, sibling pair to play at the senior level? Because that was important. The senior level for both the U.S. men's national team and the U.S. women's national team. And we have our answer. And you said last time you had no idea. Did you
I,
bother trying to look it up at all? I'm
No,
going to
I
bring the
didn't.
answer up on the screen.
I'm looking at
All
the
right, so
answer
here's
here, and I still got nothing. So
yeah, here's the answer. So it's Eric and Joy Biefeld, and Eric got 2 caps in 1986. Joy, though, had a very long and distinguished career, and if that name is not familiar to you, again, with Eric the brother getting 2 caps, probably not terribly surprising, although uh, Eric was part of that first UCLA NCAA championship victory. That's the one that went to all the overtimes, went like 166 minutes or whatever it was. We covered that on a previous podcast series that we did for the longest NCAA Division I soccer match in championship history. So he was part of that team. He was a starting defender on that UCLA squad. So he had a couple of caps in 1986. Joy, though, originally started playing for the national team under her maiden name, but got married, and most people probably know her much better as the San Diego Spirit star Joy Fawcett, that we have talked quite a bit about in the last couple of episodes. But she and her brother both played for the senior national teams, and to my knowledge, I even looked again this week to see if I could find something different, and no one submitted anything to the contrary. So right now I'm going to go with, I think they're the first and the only brother sister siblings to play at the senior levels for both our men's and women's national teams. So again, I would love if someone has a different answer to share that, but they're the only ones I can find. In fact, I don't know that anybody kept that record. I just stumbled across it as part of our background research for our last couple of episodes. And then that
it's
got me
kind of
digging to try to find out if there were others, and I
yeah.
couldn't find any.
It's interesting that it hasn't happened since then. You would think maybe just kind of the way the sport has proliferated, especially in the last 10, 15 years, that it could have happened again. But yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting to me that not only has it only happened once, but that it happened so long ago and hasn't even come close to happening again, it sounds like. Such that
Well,
there's not even a whiff of it.
and we have multiple examples of brothers playing and sisters playing, but brother and sister have a hard time finding those combinations. Or like I said, that's the only combination I have found. So
A
it's a little
sociologist could probably have a field day with that, but
right.
that's for another podcast.
Yeah. So anyway, that was our answer. A little obscure trivia question, but ties in directly to a San Diego legend here.
Obscure trivia question that ties into a San Diego legend could also be the name of this podcast. So
yeah, maybe we need to rethink the title.
Yeah.
That would be a good one. That almost sounds like when people do, my band name or something. Or an album
Yeah,
name.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, let's go ahead and look at. Sorry, I have the wrong thing in front of me here in terms of the rundown. We did the trivia questions. Birthdays this week. I just have one to kind of highlight for this week, mostly because it pertains directly to the San Diego Sockers, who we're going to talk about here in just a second. But Renee Ortiz, one of the current assistant coaches with the San Diego Sockers, has a birthday coming up this Thursday, April 23rd, which is the day before what is going to be game 2 of the MASL finals. Game 1 is, as we record this on Tuesday, it's tomorrow night on Wednesday. Will be game 1 against the Milwaukee Wave, but game 2 will be on Friday. Renee Ortiz will have his birthday in between there. He also is a former Sockers player and still currently, I believe, a teacher and coach at Hilltop High School. So happy birthday to Renee Ortiz, and good luck to the San Diego Sockers. And right now, they're my only item I had in the news and current events of people setting records. In the county, the Sockers have made it to yet another indoor final with their victory over the weekend. and they will, and this is a true best 2 games out of 3 as opposed to the little mini game situation they've done in their other series. So the first game will be in Milwaukee, like we said, on Wednesday, and then Friday, game 2, and then if needed, Monday will be game 3 for the Sockers.
Have they
Did
always
you
done
have,
that where the final is best 2 of 3 instead of the kind of 2 in a mini game? I didn't realize that.
well, in the MASL, I don't I don't know for the final if they've done it 3 full games because I haven't been following as closely as I used to. But back in the day, for MISL and NASL, I mean, there was a time that the final series in the MISL was the best 4 games out of 7 is what they would play. And you would play on back-to-back evenings and have a travel day. It was more like the NBA or some, hockey, some of these other sports where you have multiple games played close together in your final. So they'd have a best of 5, semifinals, and then a best of 7 finals. But that was fairly common in the MISL in its heyday.
Huh. I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think to cut costs and other things in the MASL, they've done the 2 games with the mini game. But I don't really know how the final went, or how it has done. I know it's changed. The whole playoff format has changed, depending on teams and depending on lots of things as the MASL has evolved in this iteration of arena soccer. But I don't recall exactly how many it was, say, for last time for the championship round. All right. Do you have anything else you want to add for the spotlight for this week for San Diego soccer news?
No, I just, if anybody knows when this format was implemented, that would be nice of you to share because I'm curious.
Yeah, I'll see if I can also take a look at it and get an answer for you for next week. But then that brings us to our first trivia question of this episode, which is going to tie directly into the Sockers here. Okay, so the San Diego Sockers have won 16 indoor championships. How many times have the Sockers been runners up in the finals? Right, we know they've won 16 championships, but how many times have they been runners up? We will give the answer to that after we do the San Diego Spirit section. Dylan, shy of actually looking at the rundown notes there, do you have any idea? Or if you've seen the answer, did you?
No, I have no idea, but I'll guess 7. It
7. All right.
feels good. Yeah.
It's a good number. You win 16, but there were 7 times you
That
missed
feels like a reasonable guess. I don't know. That's still a pretty
All right,
good winning clip. That's about like 2/3 of your, or over 2/3 of your finals appearances. I'd take that if offered to me. So
that would be a good run. We'll take a look at what the actual answer is and how close you are. I'll just give you an answer. It's not 7, but we'll let you know how close
okay,
you
all
are
right. Well,
to the
bummer.
actual answer when we come back after this first segment, or our main segment on the San Diego Spirit. All right, before we start with part 3 on the San Diego Spirit, is there anything that you notice we're missing before we jump into this?
I don't think so. I think I'm all set.
All right. So let's go ahead and we'll pick up here with part 3, which we're calling Kicking Off the 2001 WUSA season. And just do a little recap mostly from part 2, especially if anybody kind of missed that. We looked at part 2. There were 2 groups competing to be the Division 1 league. It was the WUSA was one group, and then Major League Soccer was the other one that jumped in. And we saw that when we kind of went through things in April, we found out San Diego was going to be one of the cities in the WUSA. We also found out that, again, we're talking about 2001 here. So in April of 2001, the cities were announced. Also, all the U.S. women's national team players signed an exclusive contract with the WUSA, which basically caused MLS to drop out. There really wasn't a path forward for MLS to do the women's league. Now, don't know what happened behind the scenes, but they apparently came to some kind of agreement to move forward. Immediately in May, the league, the WUSA, does their player allocation draft. So for the 24 founding members from the U.S. women's national team, they allocate 3 to each of the 8 teams. San Diego ended up with Joy Fawcett, Julie Foudy, and Shannon McMillan. Of note, I don't know if we mentioned this on the last episode, there were 2 other San Diegans that were part of that 24 group that got allocated. Mandy Clemens, who was a uni grad, sorry, and also the 1999 Herman Trophy winner. She went to Santa Clara. She was also the 1995 CIF Player of the Year here in San Diego, but she got allocated to the Philadelphia Charge. And then Nikki Serlenga, she's also a San Pasqual High School graduate, just like Shannon McMillan, but a few years after Shannon. She led Santa Clara to 4 straight Final Fours while she was in college, and was also part of the U.S. women's national team player pool prior to the league starting up. So those 2 also got out, and Nikki went to the Atlanta Beat, if I remember correctly. So we had 3 of those 24 original players, 3 of those players came from San Diego and got allocated out to different teams. You had the Olympics in 2000, and where the U.S. women's team got the silver medal. And then once that, sorry, I forgot, in August, that was when U.S. Soccer officially named the WUSA as the group that would do the Division I league. So once that was done and the Olympics were done, we finally get into October, and the WUSA is able to move forward. And that's where we left it last time. So we're going to look at from October, basically, of 2000 all the way into about May of 2001, look at the prep and all the things they did to get ready for the season, and then look at least into the first few games of the season. And it's going to be mostly, our work here is going to be focused mostly on the spirit and how they put things together with a little bit of context of the entire league. All right, so starting from October, right, the big thing is building out the rosters. They've got 6 months to put teams together and begin play in April. I don't know when exactly it was, but we do know fairly early on that the opening date is going to be mid-April that they're going to get started. So they have, the league and all the teams have quite a bit of work to do. They've announced that they're going to be doing 2 main drafts. They'll do a foreign player draft because part of what WUSA had done in this whole year leading up before they were officially approved by U.S. Soccer was going around and trying to find internationals who would be willing to play in the league. So once they officially got named as the league in October, they went around trying to sign all these players because, again, WUSA is a single entity structure like Major League Soccer. So they signed players up to the league so they knew exactly what they were going to have for this foreign player draft. So teams weren't just picking someone, hopefully, that they could negotiate with. These players had already negotiated with the league for contracts. So on October 30th, the WUSA holds its foreign player draft, and it's interesting the way they chose to do this. The league signed, remember there's 8 teams in the league, so the league signed 16 foreign players. And they decide that they're going to pair them up into groups of 2. So when you draft, you're drafting those 2 players, not just 1 player. So they pre-decide who's going to be paired up. And part of the pairings, in their words from the league, is trying to make sure any internationals that come over are paired up with someone that they would be comfortable with, kind of gives them an ally while they're here playing in a foreign country to them. And of the 16 players, they end up signing four Norwegians, 4 Brazilians, 3 Germans, 2 Swedes, and then 1 player from England, 1 from Canada, and 1 from Japan. That was their 16 total players. So again, in this draft, you had to pick a pair, and the pairs, are not even. In one pairing, you may have a goalkeeper and a defender. In another pairing, you may have two forwards. It just kind of depends how they paired them up. And depending on who you had already for your U.S. national team stars, there might be two really good players out there that you might want, but that may not fit with what you already have. So it was interesting to see the way the draft was set up, and then they set up a draft order. And I thought this was interesting, the way they chose to do their draft order. They asked all the clubs basically to rank, in essence, rank kind of who had the strongest grouping to the weakest grouping of US national team players and how they had been allocated. And then that sorted out, and then they collated all those together. They assigned numbers, and they did some kind of formula that they had, came out with their draft. And Orlando ended up having the first pick, and I won't go through all of them, but San Diego ended up with the last pick, which doesn't surprise me with the 3 national team players that were allocated to San Diego. But then San Diego with the last pick, it's not really a pick. You've got 16, you got 7 people picking before you. You basically get the last pairing. So San Diego picked the group of the 2 Swedes, and that was Kristen Bengtsson and Ulrika Karlsson. Ulrika Karlsson was a goalkeeper, and she would end up actually starting the very first match for the Spirit, but not get much time after that. There was someone else came in from a later draft that ended up beating her out for the starting position. But Kristen Bengtsson would get some decent minutes and playing time. So that was the 30th. That was the foreign player draft. On the 31st, the very next day, all the teams, well, at least I don't know about all the teams, for the Spirit, I didn't double check this if all the teams did this on the same day, but the Spirit on Halloween of 2000, they announced their nickname, which would be the Spirit, because it was just the San Diego team for the WUSA. And then they revealed their crest and their colors. Also, Kevin Crowe was announced as GM, so longtime soccer player Kevin Crowe, who is just going to be inducted to the National Soccer Hall of Fame here next week. He was announced as the general manager for the San Diego Spirit. So all that happened on the 31st. So things are starting to fall in place. We've got 5 players. We now have a general manager. The next step was to announce a coach. That happened on the 7th of November. And the Spirit decided to hire Carlos Suarez, who was the former men's and women's coach at Cal Poly Pomona. So he came over to take charge of the Spirit. Later on in November, the WUSA itself, they sign an additional 5 top Chinese players. Now, China was one of the dominant teams during this time period. And the WUSA, they had a representative that was in China for most of October, really trying to get these people signed. They didn't get them signed ahead for the foreign player draft, but they did sign 5 top Chinese players, and then they made them eligible for their regular big player draft that they were going to hold in December. So you have these 5 top Chinese players that are going to be part of the next draft. And in early December, the WUSA does a big player combine out in Florida. It's invitation only. They have more than 500 people apply to be part of this combine. So there's a lot of interest on the player side. The WUSA screens those. They invite 198 people to come out for the actual combine. The draft, though, 8 teams, 15 rounds, that's only going to be 120 total picks. So a little more than half of those people are going to be eligible for being selected, because it's not just that combine group, and it's not just the Chinese or any other foreign players that might be signed to the league. It's going to be any senior in college will also be part of that draft. So that happens early December. Mid-December, we have the draft, the whole big 15 rounds that is made up of the foreign players, the combine attendees, and the seniors in college. The draft order this time is just done randomly. They had someone from the league basically have envelopes, pull envelopes out of a box or something and open it up, and it had one of the logos in there. And that's how they determined the draft order. So in the first round, if you pick first, in the second round, or at least in all the even rounds, the whole order would flip. So if you picked first in round one, you're going to pick eighth in round two. And it just goes back and forth between the odd and even rounds. So the San Diego Spirit would pick third in the odd rounds, and then I think sixth in the even rounds is what it was. And we won't go through every single draft pick, but of those 15 selections that the San Diego Spirit had, they had the first, it's actually 10 people because they got 2 picks in the fourth round to make, it was compensation because Joy Fawcett at the time was pregnant and they knew they weren't going to have her. She was due in June, so they probably wouldn't have her till the very, very end of the season. So San Diego Spirit got an extra fourth round draft pick. So for all their draft picks from round 1 through round 9, which totaled 10 players, all those people made the team. As you get to the last 5 rounds, there were a couple that still made the team after that. But it definitely seemed like the talent started to drop off a little bit more. A couple of note of other San Diegans in that draft that was held in mid-December. The final pick of the draft, this is an interesting both trivia question, but it also highlights some of the economics of playing professional soccer at the time. The last pick in the draft was with the Bay Area Cyber Rays. And so for pick number 120, they selected Carmel Murphy. Now, Carmel Murphy she's a San Diegan, and she set, when she was playing, the San Diego CIF single season goals record at 57. That was during her sophomore year. And that still stands as the third best single season record in 2026. That still holds as the third best goal scoring season. She also, of the top 10, she holds 2 of those. In her senior year, she also got not quite 57, but she got high enough to be still in the top 10 list here in 2026. She also holds the CIF career goal scoring record. She set at 172 goals for her 4-year career. That eclipsed the previous record of 124. And that career goal record still stands today in 2026. The current next best career goal scoring record is 146. So 172 goals. Now she graduated in 1990. So goal scoring phenom. She went to Bishop's. I forget where she went to college. She was part of the U.S. women's national team pool. And I don't recall exactly if she was still actively playing at this time or not. I do know she was going to college and might have already started medical school at this point. But she was drafted, and she was one of the draft players that decided she was going to forego playing professional soccer in order to continue and finish up medical school instead, because I'll let you take a guess. Dylan, what do you think in 2001 for women's soccer, they're stated through their collective bargaining agreement, average salary was supposed to come in around?
You're talking like annually?
Yeah,
Let's
annually.
say. Okay, because I know soccer contracts are often in weekly wage, which is a weird thing, but
Right, and their big thing for the WUSA was to be fully professionalized, that you could afford to live off of this
I mean,
contract.
I feel like no matter what I guess, it's gonna be lower than that. But I'm gonna say they're shooting for somewhere like 20,000 a year.
The average for it was either 40 or 45,000.
Oh, that's better than I'd
Is
have
what they were
guessed.
shooting for, which was, you know, closer to a real in 2001 professional wage that you could live off of. Um, but they did have a floor, or they did have a minimum. And the minimum, unfortunately, was what you guessed, $25,000 a year. And for someone who, like Carmel Murphy, who I'm guessing here was probably well into her education and getting ready to start her medical, profession with medical school, and maybe interrupting that for potentially $25,000 a year was probably, a non-starter. And I bring this up not only because she's a San Diego connection, but how many other female soccer players at that time period might have been in the same boat that I probably could have competed. I may have liked to compete, but you're telling me I might make $25,000. I could make more, but I might make
For reference,
25,000.
25,000 in 2001 is about 47,000 today, and
Okay.
40,000 in 2001 is about 75,500 today.
Okay. That's
So
not too bad,
the
especially
40,000 is like not an absurd salary, but the 25,000 is a little bit absurd to call fully professional. I think
yes.
I mean, I'm not saying you couldn't live on $47,000 annually today if you were like a single person with no kids who like didn't have any debt. Like you could make it work.
Right. Yes.
But
Um, so there, she is one example, and just as a like to follow up the story with Carmel Murphy, um, she did get her medical degree, and she actually practices in North County, San Diego, as a pediatrician. So um, she did go fulfill her career that she wanted to do. But again, this kind of brings up the point. I wonder how many people at that time, and I think we see this with all leagues, all startup leagues, when someone has the chance to try to pursue a professional dream, but maybe isn't going to be paid very much. And you kind of have to weigh, like, how many years do I try to make this happen versus when do I cut bait and just do something else? And I think a lot of times that happens when a family gets started. Like you just, like it as you said, it's fine to kind of struggle and try to do this when I'm single, but as soon as I start to have other responsibilities, it makes it a lot more difficult to justify even in 2001 a $25,000 a year salary, um, for professional sports. And I guess, I mean, I don't know what their commitment was for 12 months, but that was their, you know, salary for the season. So I don't know if they were paid during the active part of the season or if it was split up over 12 months. I have no idea how they did their actual payment structure. Anyway, Murphy declined the spot with the cyber rays, and as we said, stayed in medical school and is now a pediatrician in North County, San Diego. All right. Well, with those 15 players being selected and the 5 others that were previously selected, the 3 U.S. women's national team players and the 2 foreign nationals, that gave teams 20 players to get started with, right? That they could start having a camp, and that's eventually what the teams were going to have as final rosters, was a 20-player roster. But very quickly, it was decided that there needed to be an additional supplemental draft, which was held on the 4th of February in 2001. And that extra draft was specifically for college seniors, right? People who had just finished in the previous fall their college seasons. And again, they did a player combine. They only had 4 rounds. This time around, San Diego, um, also because of a trade, would get 2 second-round picks. But of the 4 players that they got no 4th-round pick. So of the 4 players that they picked out of that supplemental draft, only one, Carissa Hampton, actually made it to the final roster. And then all teams, depending when they chose to do it, for the Spirit on the 9th of February, they held open tryouts and they invited 20 additional players to come to the open tryouts. And again, they had one player make it from that team, Rhiannon Tanaka. And then they finally opened training camp on the 1st of March. The training camp was supposed to be held at UCSD, but if anybody's heard some of our earlier episodes when we did some of our weekly snapshots, we actually covered this particular week. And one of those, and we had horrible rains at that time in 2001, late February into early March. It was just absolutely like just rain soaked areas. So the women had to go down to the ARCO training center to start their preseason. So they were there for a little bit, then they came back and finished up at UCSD. And while they're doing their kind of preseason training camp, they sign their final player to make their 20-player roster, and that is the Nigerian star forward Mercy Akide. So they sign her on the 9th, and then the Spirit finally have their first exhibition on the 11th of March, where they lost 2-3 to the Atlanta Beat, an exhibition match that was actually played in El Paso, not in Atlanta or in San Diego, but just I don't know if there was maybe the hint of some future team to be there. They were trying to generate some interest, or maybe trying to meet halfway for travel. I don't really know why it was held in El Paso, but that's where they played their exhibition. And again, the Spirit lost 2-3 in that particular match. All the teams then had to, because most teams were now above 24, so all the teams, they were going to have a waiver draft. All the teams had to cut their roster down to at least 24. If you cut your roster down to 24, then you wouldn't be able to participate in the draft, but you could cut it down as much to 20. And if you cut it down to 20, then you'd get 4 picks in the waiver draft. So wherever you were between 20 and 24, you get some extra picks. The Spirit going into the waiver draft were at 28 player. Yeah, I think they actually waived 6. So I think they were at third. No, they were at 28. They waived 6. So they had 2 picks in the waiver draft, which they reclaimed a couple of those players, but those players didn't actually make the final roster anyway. So that really didn't help out the Spirit in any particular way for the waiver draft. Eventually, though, in starting on the 22nd of March through the 31st of March, all the WUSA teams met at the ARCO Olympic Training Center for like a more traditional baseball spring training. They got all the teams together. They had multiple matches on select days. And when they had game days, those days were open to the public. So that was a cool thing. If you were here in San Diego, you had every WUSA team here, and you could go down to the Olympic Training Center and watch a triple header of soccer games. Usually it was at least a triple header, and sometimes they were on multiple fields. But you could go down and catch several soccer games. The public was not allowed on the other days when they were doing various trainings, but on the designated match days, you could go down there and watch, frankly, the best women in the world all in one location trying to play for teams and start up this new league. So that was a pretty cool experience for anybody who got the opportunity to take advantage of that back in 2001. The season then officially opens on the 14th of April, and the league intentionally designates only one match that first opening weekend. They wanted all eyes to be on that particular match. Any thoughts? I know this is a little before your time, but I know you know some of the names. Any thoughts to what the matchups they were trying to do for this first game in the WUSA?
I mean, I would imagine that the national team players would be involved. So, I'd like to imagine maybe some of those San Diego people, or your Mia Hams, that caliber.
Mia Hamm is definitely one of them. So Mia
Yeah.
Hamm played for the Washington Freedom. So Mia Hamm at this time is, I think, without a doubt, the best player in the world. Um, so you got Mia Hamm, and again, we've had the Olympics recently. We're not too far removed for the '99 World Cup. So you have Mia Hamm playing for the Washington Freedom over on the East Coast, and the matchup they made sure they had was with the Cyber Rays, who were playing on the West Coast, and Brandi Chastain, right? The one who scored the winning penalty kick
Yes.
to secure the '99 World Cup. So, it was, and we had mentioned this a little bit last time, the WUSA, and again, to a fault, and this is to a fault, I think, for every professional league, and getting into even some of our earlier comments about the NWSL and Columbus, but there is, to me, I think, this pervasive feeling in the people who have the money and trying to do the soccer leagues in this country that all you need to do is, if you market it right, everybody will just show up. And I think you can do a one-off event and that can be true. But to do a full-on season in a league, that changes the equation. But for this first event, that's what it was. It was Mia versus Brandi, two separate teams. East Coast, West Coast. They decided to do the opening match in Washington, so they played at RFK Stadium. So you're in the nation's capital. Your league's called the WUSA, right? They're playing up as many things as they can here. The game, for the most part, I think anybody who goes back and watches it, and you can find copies of the match on YouTube and things. It's hard to watch. It is not very good soccer. I think everybody agrees. You've had teams that have tried, at best 6 weeks to try to put a working group together and be considered, the top league in the world in terms of soccer. So as expected, it wasn't the best soccer game. It ends up being 1-0 because Brandi Chastain fouls Mia Hamm in the box to give up a penalty kick, and it was scored by one of the Brazilian internationals, Pratinha, who is also an excellent player. And that's how it ended, 1-0 Washington over the Cyber Rays for the opening match there with the penalty kick.
That's just
And
such a 2001 team name, the Bay Area Cyber Rays.
Bay Area Cyber Rays,
I
yes.
just can't get, like, I can picture the conversation where that name was birthed that happened on AIM. Like,
Oh yeah,
I can
of
picture
course
it.
it
Yeah,
did.
yeah.
And you're in the Bay Area, right? So you're there in Silicon Valley. Like we got to have tech in here
Or like
somehow.
whatever Yahoo's chat was, their version.
Oh yeah. And then the Washington Freedom. I mean, some of the names, San
Well,
Diego
and this is
Spirit,
pre 9/11 2001 as well. So this is like
Yes,
before that nationalism.
right. So that was the first match that opening weekend. Um, and 34,000 people showed up. That attendance record stood for a very long time. I can't remember when it was finally broken. I believe somewhere with the NWSL, but I can't remember at what point. But 34,000. That's a decent crowd for an opening match. Of course, you have to have the right stadium, right, to hold enough people, but um, huge television audience. I think they had as well, relatively speaking. But there was a lot of marketing and hype around this first match. The rest of the teams all open their season the following weekend. So the Spirit have their first match on the 22nd of April. They have a home match. They are playing the Philadelphia Charge, and the Philadelphia Charge is another San Diegan on that team we talked about before, Mandy Clemens. And also, USD had just gone through a huge amount of renovations. Prior to the WUSA coming, it was just those, you and I have both been to Torero Stadium on the campus of USD, and it was just the big cement bleachers on the north side. That really was it. So all the bleachers on the east side behind the goal and all the nicer seats and press box and stuff over on the south side, those and the ones that are all stainless steel, right? So all the ones that went in there were um, added specifically for the um, the San Diego Spirit matches and do the upgrades. So it was a sellout for that first match at USD, but the sellout was the capacity of Torero Stadium was 6,155. In fact, the Spirit sold out quite a few of their matches. It was a bit of a hot ticket, especially early on. Um, but again, much smaller venue. Nice venue, nice field. They redid the field, added the seats. It was as someone who went to some Spirit matches and watched some games there and sat in the East End behind the goal, like I like doing for matches. It was a lot of fun, and a great place to watch a soccer match. Fun crowd. But unfortunately, on that day, the opening match, first game in history, the Spirit would fall 2-0 to the Philadelphia Charge. Mandy Clemens, as we talked about, would come on as a late match sub. I think she only got about 10 minutes in that game. So the Spirit would kick off the season with a loss and not scoring any goals. Next weekend, on the 29th of April, they would travel across the country to the New York Power, where they would draw 0-0. So 2 games in, they still haven't won a match. They haven't scored in a match. And that set up the big Cinco de Mayo game. And if I had been paying more attention to the detail of putting this together along with some of our other episodes, I probably would have bumped this particular episode to the 5th of May because that's a Tuesday and that's when we normally record. And I would have done that on the 25th anniversary, but I didn't plan this one out very well. So anyway, on the 5th of May, they had a big Cinco de Mayo match, and coming to town were the Washington Freedom with Mia Hamm. So the match was dubbed, if you look in the newspapers, you see big ads in there, half page, quarter page ads in the newspapers, and it's called Cinco de Mia. And, big picture of Mia Hamm, but like we see in terms of marketing, because it's how we do things in soccer, whether it's Messi, whether it's later in the NASL with Pele, earlier with Pele in the NASL, the focus is on Mia Hamm rather than the San Diego Spirit when you look at a lot of those ads. But they, again, sell out. It's at 6,155. Washington's coming into the match with a perfect record, but the Spirit get their first win, 2-0, and this was part of our trivia question from last week. Who scored those first 2 goals, Dylan?
McMillan.
Shannon McMillan. So Shannon McMillan got both the first 2 goals and scored in the 33rd minute and then again in the 87th minute to seal the match. And that would be their first victory of the season, and really a chance for them to start, I don't know about turn their season around. We're only 3 games in, but really kind of get the momentum going a little further. And I think for us, that's where we're going to end part 3. And then in part 4, we'll look at how the whole season wraps up, specifically in terms of the Spirit. And then we'll probably, after that, do another episode looking at how the 2002-2003 seasons kind of played out, and then look at the aftermath and the legacies. So we probably have about 3 more episodes to go in this series before we eventually wrap everything up regarding the San Diego Spirit. All right, so Dylan, any thoughts or comments about the WUSA kicking off, the San Diego Spirit getting started back here in 25 years ago in 2001?
I guess the main 2 things are just how it almost feels like we could be talking about soccer today. Like it's like you said, it almost feels like we haven't learned anything, which maybe we haven't. But also, I did want to say that the renovations to USD were marvelous. Torero Stadium, I think, is an excellent place to watch a game of soccer. One of the things I loved about the Loyal experience, I think the way that it's designed, is a natural consequence of the geography of the area. There's hills on three sides, but I think if any stadium that is looking for like a similarly, 5 to 10,000 seater with similar geography, that is the way to do it. The way the seats are lifted above
Yeah.
the field, literally not a bad seat in the house. So yeah, I really adore that little stadium. I'll always, take the opportunity to go to games there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is one of the best places we have in our county, definitely, to watch a soccer match. Because you're right, all the seats are good. And it's one of the better places in the country. And I think the unfortunate thing, the way, and we'll talk about this when we get into our 1968 San Diego Toros episodes, but we have forever in this country, well, I think it's part of just our sporting culture and sporting makeup as well, just as Americans. We would, I think the average American would look at a stadium like Torero that only holds 6 to 7,000 people, depending how you also want to arrange some extra seats in there, as not good enough, right? And it's minor league. It's not a good venue because it's too small. But if you can hold 100,000, well, then that's a great venue because it's more. I think we just always view things in this country as more is better, and in things that don't really necessarily matter. We saw it in the Soccer City conversations, prior to the Loyal, that the whole argument over how big the stadium should be, and people on the San Diego state side saying, like, you can't go below 35,000 for a stadium. Like, then you're not a real football team. If you have a football team playing there, it's too small.
You know what
And
would
on the soccer
actually be
side,
awesome, like seriously awesome, is a 25,000 seater like American football stadium with a roof. Like that would go so hard. And but like you said, they have to, in American sports. It's always bigger is better and more is better.
well, and I think you get we see it with Major League Soccer and this idea of, where does Major League Soccer rank in terms of leagues around the world? And one of the metrics that some people will throw out is team valuations. And like, MLS teams are more valuable on paper
That's
than other teams, so they must be better, depending how you define better. But I think in the U.S. we do that, and if ticket prices go up, there's some people say, "Oh, well, that must mean we're good then, because there's more demand and there's an increase in the price for tickets, even though I might be squeezed out from getting tickets to a particular match. But it must mean we're doing something right." Like, we have a very, as a sporting culture, we have a very different perception of money and attendance numbers and television rating numbers, because again, it feels like from the people who hold the purse strings, for them it's all about the commercialization and what they're getting back out of it individually for them, not so much for their team. I think there's, in this country, and global sport is moving more, it's becoming more Americanized, as the decades go on, but it's more about valuing, for those owners, protecting their investment, and fans, they're customers. We hear them use those terms, right? We hear the NWSL Jessica Berman talk about, owning a sports team being an asset class, and we it it's all about those owners' investment. And I think to them, the individual fan that comes through the gate, they're totally interchangeable as long as they're still paying money.
Well, 100%. And I mean, they talk about, you hear this kind of similar logic when you hear about teams talking, or leagues rather, trying to appeal to, like the casual fan. And it's like, well, You know who you start to lose when you're like a very casual, appealing like thing is the diehards. And I know you could hear me barely restraining myself. The
Yeah.
reason MLS teams are so valuable is because they cannot be relegated. Like I feel like that needs to be screamed every time somebody brings up MLS team valuation. Like it's literally that simple.
Yeah, there's a when we get to that 1968 San Diego Toro series, there's some interesting promotion relegation conversation we'll talk about from the 60s that I wasn't aware of before. So we'll bring that up. But also, uh, which I feel I see all the time is a wealthy investor. Say I won't even want to call him a team owner yet, but an investor, someone who has their eyes on owning a sports team. Um, there is account after account after account of these American business owners traveling to Europe, experiencing a game, usually in England, but not always, and witnessing the passion of the fans in the stands and thinking, why can't we do that here? But when they come back here to the US, it's all about the American sports model. And they totally lose sight of the fact that that team is an integral part of that community. And they just think it can be replicated with good marketing. Just I can bring in anybody here and they will behave that way because the product is going to be so good. But
It's
we
for
see
lack
that
of
that fallacy happen
yeah.
over and over and over again for more than 50 years. It was back in the 20s and 30s with the original ASL.
People and I think yeah, we could do a very long podcast about this dynamic specifically, but there's a very like underlying dynamic in American sports culture where like the idea of labor as like a class is like fully removed from the concept of sports, both on the player side and also on the fan side is more what I'm getting at here because like and I'm not trying to like inject like politics into this so much, but there is a political element to it. You if you want an atmosphere like Liverpool has at Anfield every week, you need people who like going to that game is the best thing they have every week. And I'm not saying make your population destitute and like give them football,
Right.
like not Pan Am Circus says, but like you need people who like, for lack of a better way of describing it, like this is their thing. And you don't get that when you're charging as much as you possibly can and squeezing every dollar you possibly can out of people because the people for whom the Venn diagram of people for whom sports and the teams they support is like their entire life, and people who don't have that much disposable income is nearly a circle.
Yeah, the working class historically are the ones who bring the passion inside
And
the
I
stadium.
use Liverpool as an example for a very specific reason. They're a historically very left leaning, working class supporting club, and their fans, say what you want about their fans, but their match going fans have historically been very solidified against price hikes and things like that. And I know, the current FSG John Henry ownership group is not well liked there for financial reasons, but yeah, anyway, I'm just saying there's a reason I picked them as an example. Like that was not an accident.
Yeah, it's I'm as I was saying for your passion comes from your working class supporters, which are usually the ones that will show up week in and week out and be the vocal supporters and your singers, as opposed to your polite clappers who sit in other parts of the stadium and
The
may
happy
show up
clappers.
to the happy clappers to a handful of matches, um, which is you know everybody should be able to go to a soccer match. That's not what we're saying here at all. But if the passion is what you're after, you have to make sure you welcome and nurture that group and become part of the community. If you're just going for the event, which I think that's what's been frustrating to me watching the NWSL news today. and the franchise fee. And I saw a graphic that someone put out that it effectively, that franchise fee could have paid the salary for every non-national team player, because the national team player salaries were covered early on in the NWSL, but every other player in the NWSL. So that since the NWSL owners have been covering salaries and who they covered, it could cover basically all the salaries since the inception of the NWSL, just this one franchise fee. After the heels, now I'm getting all hot about this, but on the heels of all the stuff they had in this offseason about starting up this high impact player rule and not raising the salary cap and everything else, it's I know it's not as simple as that, but when you look at
But
those
it
two things
really is,
together,
though. Like at the end of the day, anyway, you're right. We are getting way off topic here, but
yeah,
it it really is that simple, though. Like the people who do the work that creates the value are not the ones taking home the product of that value. Like, not to get all Karl Marx about it, but that is fundamentally true, especially in the NWSL.
yeah, I think maybe we should wrap this up before we get too
Yeah,
far
yeah, yeah.
off on
Before
our
this becomes a
topic.
politics podcast. Yeah.
All right. Um, let's uh, let's see. We'll do the trivia question just a second. I was trying to think what order I want to do this, but we'll be back next week with another episode. Um, but the episode that we're doing next week is going to specifically tie into the trivia question that we're going to give you here in just a second. But before I give you the trivia question, again, if you like San Diego culture, you like soccer, you like history, hit us up, reach out, contact us in some way. You can, oops, let me find it here since I don't have the right button handy on the screen. Well, can't get to it at the moment. I'll get to it in just a second. Um, but there we go. All right, you can email me for those who are watching. It's on the screen. You can email me at john@bigpinedigital.com. You can send a message in our comments here if you'd like, or if you're on Blue Sky, you can send us a message and find us there at San Diego Soccer History, sorry, sdsoccerhistory.org. Okay. So it gives us to our trivia question. Next week, we had alluded to this a little earlier in the podcast. We are going to be doing an episode specifically around Kevin Crowe and kind of his history, since he is being formally inducted into the National Soccer Hall of Fame on May 1st, along with the other inductees. So next week, we'll highlight Kevin Crowe's legacies, specifically as it relates to San Diego, and maybe highlight, as we always do, some of the more obscure trivia and San Diego connections with Kevin Crowe that you might not read about in some of the other sources. If you're a longtime local, you very much know Kevin Crowe as a member of the San Diego Sockers. It's the only professional organization he played for as a player. Played for them, outdoor and then indoor. Many times Defender of the Year, all those things lots of people know about. We're going to try to uncover some of the things that people don't know as much about Kevin Crowe. But all that said, since he is about to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, I'm just getting some of my stuff ready to put on the screen here.
Real quick,
Yeah.
before you pull up that one, I don't know that we gave the answer to the first question.
Oh, did we never give the answer to the first question?
I gave my guess, but I don't. You told me it was wrong, but you didn't tell us what the answer was.
Okay, we did not. Thank you very much. Let's go and bring that up. So let's do that one first.
We know that it's not 7.
We know that it's not 7. So let's bring up the question one more time to make sure everybody has it. So the question is, San Diego Sockers have won 16 indoor championships. How many times have they finished as runners up? All right. So correct answer, not 7. It is only twice. So obviously, they haven't won the championship every time they've been playing, but a lot of the times they got knocked out in the semifinals. So only twice have they made it to the championships and not come away as the victor in a championship series. That was back in 2001, which, if you take that one as an example, the kind of Sockers never really in that iteration of the Sockers, which we're going to actually look at. There's 3 iterations of the San Diego Sockers. A little later this calendar year, we're going to look at that second iteration that started back up again in 2001. It was probably the least successful iteration of the San Diego Sockers. So they made it to that finals that first year. They came back as the San Diego Sockers and started playing again, as a Phoenix club, shall we say. And then they never made it to the finals again in that run before this third iteration. So 2001 was the first time, and then the other time was just last season. They lost in the finals. So that was the only other time they've made it to the finals and lost. So they're back in the finals again this year. We'll see if they win the double, since they won the Shield for the best record during the season, and see if they can knock out the Milwaukee Wave, who have some outstanding players. MASL announced their awards yesterday, I think, the end of season awards, and Milwaukee had 2 or 3 players that had, won their end of season awards, and for the first time I can remember in a long time, there were no San Diego Sockers anywhere in there in those award categories, at least the ones that they announced. So we'll see how that series plays out as we go later this week. So Dylan, thank you for reminding me about the other trivia questions, so we didn't go a whole week then with two trivia questions hanging on us. But you had said even with 7 losses, that would be a good winning percentage. What do you think now with a winning percentage of 16-2?
I mean, that's fantastic. And the math nerds in our audience will understand when I say the word nearly is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, but that is a nearly 90% winning percentage.
Yeah, it's impressive. So we'll know next week whether they are 17-time indoor champions and have clinched the double or not, because if they go to a third game, that'll be the day before we record our next podcast. Okay, are we ready to do the final trivia question now, or have we missed something else?
No, you're ready. We're ready.
Okay, so Kevin Crowe, we talked about being inducted into the National Soccer Hall of Fame. He now becomes the 6th member of the San Diego Sockers organization who has been inducted into the National Soccer Hall of Fame. So the question is, again, let me get this pulled up. The final question about this is, can you name, or how many of the other 5 members that have been inducted into the National Hall of Fame can you name? So I'll give you a chance even to shout out one, possibly, Dylan, if you want. But
yeah, I think I can.
I think I
can guess one of them. I mean, I think Landon, right? He did technically play for the Sockers, and he is certainly in the Hall of Fame. So
Landon Donovan is one of those 5. Yes.
Okay, that's the only
correct
one.
Answer, and that's the one that I think would slip by some people.
That's interesting.
If they're thinking more of some of the long-term members of the San Diego Sockers that might.
Well, you're welcome to those people.
So we have one down. Landon Donovan is correct with 1. So there are 4 others. We're going to leave you with those 4 to see if you can figure those out between this show and the next show. So again, leave us a comment on our YouTube channel, because we'll have the question posted there as well, or contact us via Blue Sky, like we said, sdsoccerhistory.org, or you can send me an email, john@bigpinedigital.com. So send us your trivia questions. Dylan, do you have any last comments before we head out?
I don't think so. I think I'm all set.
Okay. Sounds good. Then send us your trivia questions, and like we said, we'll reveal the correct answer on our next episode of This Week in San Diego Soccer History. Until next time, get out and support San Diego soccer. Good night, everyone.